Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Wednesday, May 18th, 2022. Black women are moving on from financial fear and achieving fiscal freedom while accumulating wealth. And they are also learning a positive difference regarding relationships to money. And there's no one more qualified to talk about this, specifically as it relates to Black women and Black people and wealth, than our guest this morning, a tax lawyer and financial analyst by trade, Melinda Hightower, who now heads the Multicultural Investors Strategic Client segment at UBS, the world's leading wealth manager. We're also joined this morning by James Wright of the Washington Informer and Brigitt Thompson, a contributor for the Baltimore Times. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you. James is not with us yet, but we do have Brigitt, and we have certainly our special guest, Melinda Hightower. Melinda, you did I guess you were responsible for a report recently on wealth and Black women. I want to jump right into it because it's a topic. Financial literacy in itself is something that I believe that we should talk more about.
Absolutely. It's something that we've really put as the cornerstone of our mission for my business, because financial literacy is really the key to translating from fear to freedom when it comes to finances.
Yeah.
And keeping our eye on the prize with our own goals. I'm interested in the part of the report that talked about the fear of actually discussing money. Within a family system, there can be reluctance to even bring the topic up. I was really interested in that. So
yeah, absolutely. And so it's really interesting when you think about it. These are women that have had enormous success, but they still struggle to talk about it. When we spoke with them, 8 and 10 were really focused on leaving an inheritance and said that it was something that was incredibly meaningful to them. And they had also taken steps to implement a plan. But more than half had not had a discussion about finances with their inheritors, with their children, their nieces, their nephews, the people who were going to be responsible for carrying on that legacy. And that's really coming from a place of fear. When we talk to them specifically about what is it that you're concerned about when it comes to talking about wealth with your children, and one of the main concerns was that they thought it was going to ultimately impact the drive of their children, and they wanted their children to discover success on their own terms and not be focused on family wealth in order to do so.
Yeah, and Melinda, this report, talk a little bit more about that. What stood out most for you? What maybe something surprised you as you did the survey and you put the report together?
Well, I think one of the things that surprised me is the commitment to investing in Black communities. Like, first off, we all know that that buying Black has been something that Black communities have been focused on for so long. But to see that also show up in investing, that was the surprise for me, that more and more Black investors are saying it's not just enough for me to put my money to work. I want to put it to work on behalf of the communities that I live in, the communities that look like me. And that's something that was really incredibly surprising to me individually, and I think to financial institutions more generally, because that means we have to start creating more solutions that enable that kind of investment.
Yeah, and so let's talk about some of the opportunities. What are some of the current opportunities that, from your perspective, the Black women in general are taking advantage of, or should be looking to take advantage of?
Sure. So I think one of the opportunities that Black women should take advantage of is investing more. And I know that given what's happening in the market and the world today, that can be sort of far away. However, I would say we always like to buy on a sale. Why not do so now, when that volatility is really causing downward pressure on prices? You now is a great time to start thinking about, what is it that I want to invest in? How can I invest more? And that's really one of the opportunities we see with Black women and Black people more generally, that even though Black women are doing well and amassing wealth in different ways, there's still hesitancy around the stock market. And that's an opportunity. And really, the opportunity to create true generational wealth comes with making your money work for you by investing it in something that's going to grow.
Yeah, and you're right. Obviously, we not just Black women, Black men, Black culture. We've been skeptical of the stock market historically. Why should we now be more confident in it, or should we be confident in it?
Well, look, we've always been skeptical. I know my grandmother has, from the jump, was like, I like to drive by my money. Like, I get it. So I think that is something that, it's understandable why we would be skeptical of a system that wasn't built with it in mind. But I think now what you're seeing is, you're seeing breakthroughs. You're seeing Black CEOs of publicly traded companies. You're seeing Black leaders in financial services institutions. And I think more and more, the best way to get catered to is as a client. And when you're putting that money to work in the system, that means that the system is going to be working on behalf of you, because the power of the Black dollar is undeniable. We've seen that same kind of catering happen in consumers. For consumers, we need to see that same kind of tailored solutions happen for investors as well.
Yeah, we're talking with Melinda Hightower, who heads the Multicultural Investor Strategic Client segment at UBS. And UBS, folks, is the world's leading wealth manager. So we feel confident that we got somebody who knows what she's talking about this morning. Brigitt, I know Brigitt's been inspired by the report. Brigitt, go ahead and talk to Melinda about some of the questions you have as well.
Well, I think the big question I have, Melinda, is about money mindset. You talked about a fear of investing, or a reluctance maybe to dive in and invest. And I know I've experienced that myself. And I'm now, in my 50s and looking back and thinking, okay, what kinds of decisions have I made? What kinds of suggestions would you make for people to start to move through and adjust their mindset? Part of it, I know, is research and collecting data and seeing what's actually happening. What else would you say?
So I would say the first thing we have to do is really face our fears, point blank. And I think that when it comes to money, we will rarely make great decisions if we're making them from fear instead of equity. So the very first thing is to face your fear. What is it? Is it fear of losing money? Is it a broader fear of having to work and not being able to retire? Fear of losing your home, fear of going into debt? You have to face it head on and then turn it into freedom. So for example, if your fear is, I don't know when I'm going to be able to retire, then the freedom aspect of that is, I will be able to choose when I retire and how I retire. I will have that power, and it will be within my control. So once you face your fear head on, then you have to think about what that plan would be. So in order to be able to, because money is a tool, right? And I think it's always serving someone, and we have to make sure that it's serving us. Right. So when you think about the tool of money, it's sort of, if your goal and the biggest fear that you have and what you need to feel financially secure is the ability to retire, then you start making sure that your money is serving you in that retirement space. So whether it be an investment in your company's retirement program, whether it be you looking at other areas outside of retirement, such as an annuity that are going to continue to pay you in retirement, you want to be able to serve that critical priority, whatever's a priority for you first, because we all have different priorities. And so tackling that fear head on is the first step to ensuring that we're making the right money moves that will serve us.
Yeah, and I'm going to lift up, and first of all, good morning to James Wright of the Washington Informer. I'm going to lift up a couple of comments here. Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times is watching. She says, we can invest in Black-owned women businesses. Black tech companies yield a larger return on investment than our Caucasian counterparts, according to a recent report. And Xerxes, and I hope I said it right, 666 is watching from Atlanta. Welcome. That individual says, we are just not taught this. I wish we did. I'm in my 40s and I am just learning the power of investment instead of keeping my money in a bank. And so with that comment, Melinda, can you talk about some folks say, well, I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s. It's too old I'm too old to get started. I don't have a retirement program savings now. So what do I do?
Well, it's never too late to get started in investing, but your path may be different. So for example, and I love that comment about making sure it doesn't just sit in the bank, because your dollar is losing purchasing power every day. And we see it in the price of gas and the price of milk and the price of anything, groceries, anything that you can see. So your money is losing value if you don't put it to work. And when you think about investing, so if you're 40, if you're 50, even if you're 60, when we think about what the returns in the market have been, if you did something completely down the middle of the road, like invest in the S&P 500, and that means like the largest 500 companies that make up that index, your money would have returned more than 200% over the last 10 years. So we need to think about that in terms of investing for the long haul. Now, depending on how old you are and where you are at the stage in life for investing, it might adjust the percentage that you put to work, right? For example, if you are younger when you invest, you have the ability to withstand a lot more volatility, a lot more of the ups and downs in the market than someone who is nearing retirement. But that still means that money is going to be put to work for you. And your goals might be different. For example, you might be investing for growth when you are younger, but as you age, you then change and start investing for capital preservation, meaning you want the value of your money to go up, but never to minimize that downside risk.
Yeah, so that old school grandma edict of I'm putting it under the mattress is just not the way to go, huh?
You know, and I think about that. I think about what my grandparents could have done if they had actually invested alongside their strategy. Now, my family's path was real estate. We are a real estate family to this day. Real estate is a critical piece of it. And there's a whole history behind why real estate is really important in Black families. But I'm proud to say, and I think, you know, Brigitt, to your point, my mom started investing for the very first time when she retired. She was 59 and a half, you know, so she started investing at 60.
Okay.
And what she did is that she was looking for local resources. I call it her AARP crew that she can trust. And they were on that learning journey together. And each of them were getting advice and coming back to the middle and saying, hey, what did you learn? What did you learn? And then I was always on speed dial to explain any questions they had about terms that they didn't encounter. And so, you know, it's to this day that my mom is now talking to me about crypto. So this is, it's never too late to start. And I also think it's never too early as well.
Yeah.
So when we,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, to the point of we were never taught this, we have to stop that cycle somewhere. So we have to start talking to our children about investing, about making choices differently. My nieces all have investing accounts and they're teenagers and they love it. And I think this generation is different in the sense that they are constantly looking things up and using the internet. And so when they want to invest in something, they invest in what they know. That's the rule of thumb. You have to make a proposal on why that investment makes sense for them. So, and also it's really interesting because kids sort of track trends. So if they love a movie and we're like, okay, let's figure out who's the producer of that movie. Is that a Disney movie? Let's think about doing that. And if there's a game that they really like, who is the producer of that game? And that's how we're sort of working it through with them. But that same concept applies more broadly, that you really want to look at those trends that are shaping our future, whether it's healthcare or technology or something else, and figure out how you want to invest in them.
Yeah, David Youngblood says that the number one deterrent in accumulating wealth in America is student debt. He's an advocate of eliminating student debt, and I see Melinda shaking her head in agreement with that.
Oh, look, I went to law school and business school, so hey, it's a topic I am very familiar with.
Well, but you also just laid out what your parents did and what your nieces are doing, and it goes to our friend from Atlanta who's commenting about being taught this, about finances, financial literacy. Let's go back to your report before we bring James on and bring Brigitt back into the conversation. Let's go back to the report. I asked you earlier what surprised you. Was there anything that was alarming to you that needs to be that you see needs to be addressed immediately?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, sort of the lower investment in equities was shocking for me, because when you take a look at how folks are building wealth, the wealthiest families are building wealth with investments. And while we traditionally have created different paths to wealth through entrepreneurship, and real estate and what have you, those are longer journeys many times. And so once you have that wealth, what often we don't do is we don't make the wealth work for us. So we put in all of our sweat equity and our labor to create wealth, and then we continue doing that. And we don't pivot our mindset from wealth creation to wealth preservation and generational wealth. And so that for me is, if there's any sense of urgency that I can impart, it's definitely think about investing now. Yeah. The money needs to, if you want your money, if you want your legacy to live beyond you, you have to invest. And so that is the thing that I think stands out for me as really a critical area for us to start. And I think there's a couple ways you can think about doing that. I think the other opportunity that I thought was so incredible is Black people and their commitment to the community. And I think, it's one that I grew up with, but the way we're thinking about giving back is largely through philanthropy. And philanthropy is a wonderful tool to give back, but we can also do so with the way that we invest. We can think about, I think someone mentioned you can invest in Black women-owned businesses, and studies are showing that on average, when you think about Black businesses and Black fund managers, when the cream is often rising to the top. And what we're seeing is that in order to even break through in these industries, you, by nature of that breakthrough, you are getting incredibly excellent CEOs, entrepreneurs, fund managers, investment decision makers, because they've had to be. So there's almost like an embedded selection tool when you're working with Black people and other people of color who are out in the world as entrepreneurs and investors.
Yeah, Michelle Madison says, I opened up a brokerage account last year. I'm thinking about opening up one for my grandchildren. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So when you open up one for your grandchildren, you would still be in charge and have custodial power over it. But I think it's important to teach kids about money. And what you can do is you can tell them that they have a certain amount that they can invest, and they need to make sure they need to have a goal for their investing. What are they trying to do? And have regular meetings with them when you say, okay, now what are we going to invest in? But just like we're teaching the tradition of investing, we also need to be teaching the tradition of giving back and community. So while you're opening up that investing account, you make sure that you're including your grandchildren on decisions about your philanthropy as well too, so that they can see firsthand how you're making those decisions and how you're giving back.
Wow. And Paris Brown is asking to define equity investment today.
Yeah, equity investment really sort of runs the gamut. And I think of two big areas to think through. So one is what I would call traditional stock market investing. That's the liquid space, right? And so you can invest in the market, you can invest in mutual funds or any sort of liquid vehicle. And when I say liquid, it means that you can get your money back the next day or within a day, right? So that's equity investing. Then we see another world, which is what I would call private equity investing, which is not the stock market, but it is when you're investing in private companies. Think of the next Google before it even becomes known as that, or the next Tesla, right? And that means you have to be willing to have your money not be available to you for a good 5 to 8 years. But the payoff for that illiquidity is generally higher because you don't have access to that money.
Let's bring James Wright into the conversation as well. James, thanks for joining us again this morning, as always. I know you are chomping at the bit, James. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Stacy. Question, what if I'm interested in real estate? You say you come from a real estate family. Is the best way to learn about real estate through those infomercials with those folks, who talk about and running around here with boats and cars and things like that? What is the best way to learn about real estate investing?
Yeah, so it's funny. So I think that when you think about real estate investing, there's two kinds, right? So there's owning individual properties, which is what my family used to do a lot of, where you are either owning residential or commercial properties. You're responsible as a property owner and you're collecting rent. But I actually think the best way to start with this is to think about investing in real estate through the market, where your risk is spread out amongst a number of properties. So you think about real estate funds, for example, where they own thousands of properties, and you can learn about real estate investing through the expert minds that you have working on your behalf. And I think that's a really good way to start, and it sort of diversifies your risk, and we like that a lot. So in investing in one property in one city where the market could go soft, you're investing in many others. So I think that's one way to think about that. Another way to think about learning about the real estate market is I've seen those infomercials, but I honestly think that you should take a look and talk with real estate brokers. There is a Black Real Estate Brokers Association that is wonderful in terms of the resource, and you can work with them. And there are people who operate both on the buy side and the sell side. And they are incredible resources that are available to really understand, how does it all work? What are the hidden costs in buying real estate and the carrying costs that you have in keeping that real estate? Can you really rent out a property in order to cover the mortgage that you have for that? Does that make sense for you? Will you be able to, for example, outsource to a property management company if you don't want the hassle of keeping up with tenants? Those are all things that realtors are incredible resources for, because they are tried and true, have been in the market for quite some time, and have seen everything. So I think my recommendation would be, one, if you want to put money to work right away, do it through a more liquid real estate investing through the markets. And if you want to learn, as you learn, talking to a real estate broker is one of the best things that I would say to get started.
Yeah, we'll bring Brigitt Thompson back in, and then after that we have an old friend for you, Melinda. But let's go to Brigitt first.
I thought it was really interesting that the report focused on high net worth women or high net worth investors, multicultural investors, and yet there seems to be a learning curve for everyone. There's a need to kind of take ownership of what's happening in your life, regardless of your income level. So could you talk a little bit about the willingness to learn as part of this investment process?
Sure. And I'll touch on both. There's a couple of reasons we focused on high net worth individuals. One, we're just in that business, but I think two, for me, it was important to demonstrate that they exist, that there are Black people who are thriving and doing well, and we are growing in numbers daily. Sometimes there's a sense that the only Black wealth you see it on your screen, whether it's an actor or an athlete. And while those are awesome ways to earn wealth, and I have a colleague who runs the athletes and entertainers division, he's wonderful, that's not the only way. And so for me, it was really important to paint a broader picture of what Black wealth could look like, and to have it recognized that there are various ways to earn it. So that's one thing. And then I think it was important to understand from people who have been there, because many of the millionaires we talked to were first generation millionaires. And so hearing their trajectory could shine a light for so many other individuals. Sort of how did they get there? And that the pathway does exist. We need to, I think, do more about sharing secrets, and that for people who have cracked the code, sharing that more broadly with others. But you're right, I think, in terms of feeling that accountability and that agency. One of the most popular phrases we had when we talked to Black millionaires was, "Your wealth, your decision." And they loved that. It was their money, and they didn't want to release agency or advocacy over it, even though it had grown in amount. It's kind of like what I think about Oprah, where she says, "I sign my own checks. No one else signs my checks for me. I sign my own checks all the time." And what we're finding is that sort of accountability and mindset is something that everyone should be getting engaged in. So it comes up often when we think about having, I think, your wealth cabinet. And I've talked about before that you should not be in this alone. You should be looking at getting resources and advice from different areas that have expertise. So lawyers, advisors, whomever, and you don't necessarily have to work with them, but they are robust resources for you. And for the agency that we talked about, a lot of our Black investors have advisors. They have someone trusted that they're working with. But we have that old adage of, I trust you, but I'm going to check on you. And so what we saw is 80% of Black investors, they trusted their advisor, but they were out there verifying the advice that they got with others. And the reason is that these Black investors wanted to learn alongside their advisor. They didn't want to delegate that agency to someone else. They wanted to learn alongside.
Yeah, well, Melinda, let's bring on the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publicists Association, a guy who wears many hats, including from the Chavis Chronicles, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Dr. Chavis, how are you?
Hello there.
Thank you. How are you? And you gave out excellent advice this morning. I know a lot of listeners across the country are empowered by getting this information. And then, of course, we hope they'll follow through. And Melinda, we want to discuss this matter of wealth building, wealth equity at our convention next month. The NMPA's celebrating the 195th year of the Black press. We're going to be in New Orleans. So we're going to be reaching back to you to get your advice and counsel on how we can help our publishers get in that wealth generation and wealth preservation pathway.
I'd love to. My mom's family is New Orleans, so it is a place that is near and dear to me. So happy to do it. Happy to share kind of secrets to success that I've learned. I've been in this business for 20 years of advising some of the wealthiest families, and there is a pattern that emerges to creating wealth and sustaining it.
Great.
Brigitt, I'm sorry, not Brigitt. I call Brigitt. Melinda, Deidre Owens and others are asking, where can we access the report?
Oh, yes. So you can access it at ubs.com/invest to advance. That's the title of the report, Invest to Advance. So please take a look at it. We chart the journeys of Black investors, Hispanic and Latino investors, and Asian American investors, and they're very different in terms of their paths to wealth. And so please take a look at that. And we want people to share their own experiences, their own wealth journeys, whether you are, no matter what stage you are, there's always a next step to the journey, and we want to hear about yours.
Melinda Hightower, the head of Multicultural Investors Strategic Client Segment at UBS. I wish we had more time with you. This is some great information. We really do appreciate it. This is a conversation, as Dr. Chavis indicated, that the Black press needs to have on a more regular basis, because Black people need this. We are off to a start in which obviously is not talked about. It hasn't been talked about in homes. historically, but now it's great to see that it is. And speaking of the convention, June 22nd, our summer convention featuring a special live performance by the great Stephanie Mills. Go to www.nmpa/events.com for more information on the convention. It is the 195th year of the Black Press of America. Lots to celebrate. And Stephanie Mills, who loves the Black press, will be there and do what she does best. Thanks for joining Let It Be Known. We will see you tomorrow.